Hello, fantasy fans. I have never addressed you as that before, but apparently I am doing so here. There was a question posed on the r/fantasy subreddit that I would like to hear my audience's thoughts and opinions on, and credit to r for this post, because I thought it really sparked any discussion I'd like to hear my audience's thoughts on and give mine as well, because the responses were great and it was posed in a very respectful and thought out manner. So let's go ahead and dive into that. But first, not a message from today's sponsor, no. There's actually going to be a second topic of discussion at the end of this video as well, a secondary Wheel of Time question spawned off from a tweet I had, so stick around for that. If you don't necessarily like this first one, go ahead and time code here. Moving on. Why is the Wheel of Time so popular, yet so criticized? I am wondering this as someone who is considering starting the Eye of the World. It seems as if Wheel of Time has a strange place in fantasy. Whenever people bring up the best fantasy series of all time, it's in the discussion. It has a huge fandom, tons of authors cite it as an inspiration, and it's one of the best-selling book series ever. All true. Yet, when I've seen specific discussion about the books on here, people bring up tons of problems. Overdescription, lagging through the middle, exposition dumps, too many characters, etc. All also very fair Wheel of Time criticisms. Why is this? Was the series simply ahead of its time, but now it doesn't read as well? I'd just be curious to hear people's thoughts about it. Never seen a series be so loved, yet also so criticized. I think that's actually a pretty accurate representation of the Wheel of Time's reputation in the circles outside of the diehard fandom, which I take great effort to try and delve my little toes into to see what other people outside the bubble I've formed on YouTube are saying. And you kind of hit the nail on the head here, because this is something that I think actually really represents confusion around the series as well, and I'd love to see people's responses. But one thing I want to get into first is that I think you really hit something there that is accurate, and that is that people who are up to date on more modern fantasy might not appreciate a lot of the things that Wheel of Time did first, because Wheel of Time kind of had this first to the base advantage, and now that we've seen several more fantasy series do what Wheel of Time did, maybe better, maybe worse, maybe just as well, it's all up for interpretation and opinion discussion. It's just not quite as new for someone who's coming to it for the first time as their 15th fantasy series they're getting into. So I think that's actually part of the reason why there seems to be a bit of a disconnect from the new fans and the older fans, and just something I've observed myself. But let's go ahead and get into the top responses here now. This is from Davor. Wheel of Time is very long. Wheel of Time has a lot of great aspects. Wheel of Time has plenty of flaws. Yep. Lots of people loved those great aspects, especially when they were fresh and Wheel of Time provided a large sheer quantity of them. Kind of what I was hitting on before. Did I mention it's very long? So it got popular. Now here's the thing. If a lot of people tell you a book is great, but for you the flaws outweigh the benefits, it can grate. I like what you did there with the two different greats. Anyway, this is, again, a problem I feel like the Wheel of Time fandom has, and it's... okay. The Wheel of Time fandom is extraordinarily nice in general and very welcoming to new readers. Like, one of the most generous fandoms I've ever seen, like #TwitterTime. They're so careful about spoilers. They're so into like trying to welcome in new people and encourage readers, but it can get a bit problematic when you personally don't love what's being done and you have issues and people keep encouraging you to go forward when what you're actually trying to say is like, this isn't for me. I don't love it. I want to move on. I think that's kind of what this is touching on a little bit, because, well, let's go ahead and continue here. Wheel of Time is a book with tics and obsessions. Not all great. It's a book obsessed with minutia and petty drama, and frankly, I love it for it. It asks the question, what if a chosen one actually had to unite a continent, and then actually follows up on that to see if a fractious world dragged kicking and screaming to fight Armageddon together. Right? Like, that's a huge part of why a lot of us really love the Wheel of Time. It's one of the few fantasy series that actually shows the struggles of trying to unite everyone to one common cause, and a lot of the petty things that would come along with this. And this is actually going to touch on the second topic we're going to get into here in a minute. But this, for me, was like something that needed to be said that I hadn't quite like gotten clear in my head, but totally is accurate. Because if you don't like a lot of the specific things that Wheel of Time is going to spend a lot of time on, it can totally kill the series for you. And that's why I've kind of become one of these people who's a very big, like, almost Wheel of Time apologist. I hate putting it that way, because when I have people who are like, hey, I bought the first 3 books in your recommendation and I hate them, which happens to be a little bit in the DMs, I feel bad, because it's like, there are things that I get it. You're not wrong. There are problems. I love it. It's inked on me. I love it so much. It's like my favorite thing ever put to page, but it has baggage. And I've also found the Wheel of Time fandom to be hyper aware of it. But if you ask the fandom, oh, is it worth it? They're gonna say yes. Murphy Napier, a fellow booktuber, a very good friend of mine, just put out her spoiler-free review of the Wheel of Time series, and she did a great job weighing the costs and benefits, essentially, of reading the Wheel of Time series. And she had things that are like, she thinks it's the best character arc she's ever read. She said that repeatedly. Watching the Emond's Field 5 go from where they start to where they end up is the best arcs she's seen, not just in fantasy, in fiction. And that's praise I share for the series. Like, Rand alone, I think, is the best developed character in fantasy, and I haven't found many people who have finished Wheel of Time who disagree with that, because the power creep is so well done. But on the flip side of that, she also points out a ton more problems that are not even mentioned in this post that I find to be valid, that I find to be very real problems you can have. And, you know, part of it is the Wheel of Time is aging. It's not a fresh fantasy story by any means, and it used to be the freshest, like lime zest, minty, fresh for fantasy, because it did so many things that hadn't been done before, especially with like Chosen One tropes, Old Wise Wizard tropes. Like, no one had done what Wheel of Time did, but now a lot of other people have. And if Wheel of Time isn't your first exposure, and you don't really care about like the respect of, oh, it did it first, then it's just gonna be a little bit obnoxious, and that's valid. I'm never ever gonna tell someone you're not allowed to not like the Wheel of Time. I'm not about that gatekeeping, but yeah, this is an interesting conversation. I want to get into a couple more replies here, because I don't want to talk about the top comment. I actually haven't read these yet, so we'll see how this goes. Wheel of Time is simply a very popular series that gets discussed a lot and recommended a lot, which means there are a lot of opinions, both positive and negative, floating around in this sub concerning it. The same thing happened to most popular series discussed here, although probably more frequently for Wheel of Time, because it's often recommended as a good intro to fantasy series, which means a ton of people have at least tried reading it. No one talks about the shortcomings of the shameless Lord of the Rings ripoff that is in the Iron Tower trilogy by because it's not very popular, because it's bad. I don't share that opinion. I've never read that series. I have a problem saying like ripping off Lord of the Rings in general in fantasy, because so many authors are not ripping off, they're trying to pay homage, they're trying to, you know, do their own spin. So I can't say whether or not this guy's series is doing that. Again, I just think that's part of the legacy of fantasy. But I think your first point is entirely valid, but also don't recommend the Wheel of Time as an intro fantasy series. I have never said that, at least not in recent years, now that I've become a better educated fantasy fan. Don't start fantasy with the Wheel of Time. I think that is a very bad recommendation, largely just because of the level of commitment to get through. If you're going to start reading fantasy, maybe go with either one of the real classics or something very representative of what's trendy now, and definitely not a 14 or 15 if you count the prequel book series. Holy God, don't do that. No. That's not the way to go, in my opinion. So, as a Wheel of Time authority on the internet, don't start with the Wheel of Time. That's too much to bite off. Okay, let's stop this post there, and let's go ahead and transition and talk about the next thing I want to bring up here. And that's a tweet I kind of put out as a joke the other day, because I'm recording this same day as the tweet, actually only a little bit after I put it out. But I'm not gonna release this video for a while. So the other day I tweeted out, funny how one of the biggest criticisms I used to have for the Wheel of Time was how unbelievable I found it that everyone not immediately unite against the giant evil. Now I see it should have been much more difficult to unite anyone at all in the first place. And yeah, it was a joke, but it's true. And we actually had this retweet from another user here that says the greatest antagonist of the Wheel of Time wasn't the Dark One. It was the tradition mixed with xenophobia. And that's actually a really interesting point, because if you read the Wheel of Time, it does seem that the largest struggles the characters deal with on a day-to-day basis are the petty trials and tribulations of mankind. And this kind of gets into what that comment was saying about how a lot of the Wheel of Time is focused on the minutia and drama. But that's kind of realistic, right? If like there's one thing we've learned as fantasy fans living in this today and age, it would be extraordinarily hard to unite the world against a common cause. That seems accurate, and I don't mean to be getting political here. I'm really not. I'm just trying to say, like, this is an interesting observation for Wheel of Time from this reader, that I think that's true. Like, Robert Jordan was hyper focused on culture, and I find that to be one of the largest causes of conflict within the Wheel of Time, debatably even more so than the Dark One when it comes to, like, overall page count. We spend so much time with political, like, why won't you just get in line? Oh, because you disagree with how we're going about doing it. You agree we need to do it, but it's about how we're doing it. Like, oh my God. And I think a lot of readers will find that to be tedious. But it's definitely realistic. And I don't think many people will disagree with that. And I think that's very representative of the truth that even in the most dire apocalyptic situations, part of the human condition is that we will still fight for who's in charge and doing exactly what. It's just like who we are, sadly enough. And I just wanted to like point a spotlight on this response because I think Reader Reborn, you're totally right. We're like, I wouldn't say maybe more so, but an equal antagonist to the end goals of our protagonists is fighting against the flaws of humanity, cultural differences, like just political power-grabbing, money crap. From all the way in like the third book where we really start seeing our Emmonsfield 5 begin to get power, to the final main conflict between some of our die-hard 14-book long characters, it's largely about disagreements on the human level. Anyway, I just want to hear people's comments and thoughts on this in general. I am currently getting ready to move, if not moving, depending on when I put out this video, so I may or may not be super responsive in the comment sections. You might see I'm not going to be as active here for one particular weekend, but there's gonna be a very long live stream coming up probably where I finally stack my bookshelves back full of books because they're empty right now, and when I move, you all are gonna help me in this live stream organize and set up my book section, which will be a lot of fun. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And let me know if you like these more casual, just discussion, like spark off from what someone said online videos. Have a good one, y'all.